Hi, designers! Welcome back to another beginner-friendly tutorial in After Effects. We won't be using any plugins, so you can follow along easily without any hassle. We'll start by creating a new composition. Next, let's import the files we'll be working with. I've used 4 images, a park board, 2 people player, and a newspaper. Once you've imported these files, drag them into the timeline. Now, arrange the layers. Place the park image at the bottom of the layer stack. After that, make all the other layers 3D, but leave the park layer as it is. To work more effectively, switch your view from one view to 2 views. Let's begin by selecting the newspaper layer. In the top view, move this layer along the Z-axis, positioning it further back. Similarly, select the park board layer and move it behind as well. Once done, switch back to one view to continue. Now let's animate the layer featuring the 2 people player. Select that layer and press P for position, then hold Shift and press R for rotation. Enable keyframes by clicking the stopwatch icons next to position and orientation. Press U to display only the keyframes on the timeline. Move the playhead 30 frames forward. You can quickly jump 10 frames at a time by pressing Ctrl plus Shift plus right arrow. Press it 3 times to move ahead by 30 frames. Let's add a blank keyframe. To focus on the player's layer first, let's hide the other 2 layers for now. Move the playhead back to the first frame and adjust the values. Lower the Y position to move the layer downward and adjust the Z position to move it further back. Make the necessary adjustments to fit your desired look. Once you're done with the first frame, move to the second keyframe and tweak the values again. Modify the Y and Z positions as needed to refine the animation. Once satisfied, select all the keyframes and press F9 to apply Easy Ease. Next, go to the graph editor to refine the motion further. Adjust the graph handles as shown to create a smoother and more dynamic animation curve. With this, the player animation is complete. Now, let's move to the board layer. Unhide it by toggling the visibility. Select the layer, then press P for position and hold Shift while pressing S for scale. Enable keyframes by clicking the stopwatch icons next to position and scale. Move the playhead forward by a few frames and add a blank keyframe. Go back to the first frame of this board layer and scale it up. Increase the scale value until the board moves out of the frame. Also, adjust the position value so the layer is not visible in the initial frame. Now, head to the second keyframe and preview the animation. Modify the position values, Y, Z, or even X, depending on your composition, and fine-tune the scale. Continue tweaking until the animation looks just right. Select both keyframes for the board layer and press F9 to apply Easy Ease. Open the graph editor and adjust the graph to give the animation a fast start. Shape the graph to create the desired effect, as shown here. Once done, return to the timeline and make any necessary adjustments to the keyframes. Now that the board and player animations are complete, let's move on to the news layer. Start by unhiding this layer and offsetting it in the timeline so its animation begins after the previous animations are complete. Before animating the news layer, we'll add a camera. With the camera layer selected, press P for position and enable keyframes by clicking the stopwatch icon. Move the playhead a few frames forward and adjust the Z value of the camera's position to create a zoom or depth effect. Move both the board and player layers out of the frame accordingly. If the board layer is still visible, select it, press P for position, and adjust the position values to move it slightly upward until it's out of view. Preview the animation to check the result. Once you're satisfied, select both keyframes of the camera layer and refine them. With the camera animation complete, let's move on to animating the news layer. For that, select the news layer and press R for rotation. Enable keyframes by clicking the stopwatch icons next to X rotation and Z rotation. To focus only on the keyframes, press U. Move the playhead forward a few frames and adjust the values for both X rotation and Z rotation. How you tilt the newspaper is entirely up to you. You can zoom in for a closer look or keep it at a distance. Adjust both the first and second keyframe values to achieve your desired look. Once satisfied, preview the animation. At this point, we don't want the newspaper to appear immediately. To create a smooth entrance, we'll add an opacity animation. Select the news layer again and press Shift plus T to bring up the opacity property. Click the stopwatch next to opacity to enable keyframes. Move the playhead a few frames forward and add a blank keyframe. Go back to the first keyframe and set the opacity value to 0. This will create a fade-in effect. Next, select both rotation keyframes and press F9 to apply Easy Ease. Open the graph editor and adjust the graph to create a smooth and natural motion. Fine-tune the keyframe positions as needed. Now let's make a few adjustments to the player and board layers. Select these layers and press U to reveal their keyframes. Notice that the player animation ends just as the board animation begins. To avoid the player layer becoming static, we'll add some subtle motion. Move the playhead to the second keyframe of the board layer and adjust the position values of the player layer. This small adjustment will ensure that both layers are in motion, creating a more dynamic scene. Lastly, select the camera layer's keyframes, go to the graph editor, and adjust the graph for smoother movement. Preview the animation to see how it looks so far. At this point, when the newspaper becomes stationary, we want to highlight the "Parks are empty" headline. To do this, select the pen tool while ensuring no layer is selected. Using the pen tool, draw a line over the text you want to highlight. Make sure the shape has no fill and apply a stroke to it. Use a yellowish mustard color for the stroke and adjust its width as needed. Next, offset the shape layer in the timeline so that it starts right when the newspaper becomes stationary. Now, go to Effects and Presets and search for Turbulence Displace. Apply this effect to the shape layer and adjust the amount and size settings to create a dynamic effect. After that, search for Linear Wipe under the Transition Wipe category and apply it to the shape layer. Once applied, preview the animation to ensure the Transition Wipe effect works smoothly. Adjust its settings if necessary. Then, change the blending mode of the shape layer to multiply to integrate it seamlessly with the newspaper. To enhance the depth, we'll apply a drop shadow effect to various elements. Start by searching for drop shadow in the Effects and Presets panel and apply it to the shape layer. Adjust the distance and softness settings to your preference. Next, apply the drop shadow effect to the player's layer. Adjust the distance and softness for these elements as well to maintain consistency. Finally, apply the drop shadow effect to the newspaper layer. Navigate to the point in the timeline where the newspaper is visible, apply the effect, and tweak the settings for distance and softness until it blends naturally with the scene. Once the drop shadow effect has been applied to all elements, let's import the final asset, which is the effect video. I downloaded this video from Pexels, and I'll provide the link if you'd like to use it too. Drag and drop the video onto your timeline. Since it's a large video, we'll need to scale it down. To blend it seamlessly with the composition, change the blending mode of this layer from normal to overlay. Now press T for opacity and reduce the opacity to around 20% to 30%, depending on how subtle you want the effect to appear. Once that's done, preview your final animation to ensure everything looks perfect. And that's it, you're done. I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you did, please give it a like, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe to Ace Designs for more beginner-friendly tutorials.